Based on all your experience so far, what do you think the key ingredients are for people that want to be entrepreneurs and they want to succeed?
The keys are being fearless, committed, resilient, and there's a you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to go for it like a honey badger. If you've ever seen the honey badger video on YouTube, there I, I call our people, our community, a bunch of honey badgers because they are fearless and there's a commitment. They're resilient and I think that those are key. You have to be willing to say, okay, I'm wrong and pivot quickly. It's not really how much you know anymore. I mean, it's
Welcome to Insights into Success. We're with your host Paul Dodds. We hope to educate, inspire and motivate you to achieve your own personal success. We talk to guests from all around the world from a variety of walks of life to hear the realities of their own journey to success. What challenges have they faced? How have they coped with failure? And what have been the keys or will be the keys to their own success? In our Read to Succeed interviews, we talk books that have inspired our guests, and for some, they share their secrets to marketing success. Join us as we give you insights into success. Well, welcome to Insights into Success, where our special guest today is Damion Lupo. Damion, welcome to the show. Appreciate you taking your time to share with us today. Could you kick it off just by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Paul. It's great to be with you, man. I appreciate you having me. Looking forward to diving in, having this really fun conversation. Uh, my background is I'm very unconventional, and I basically have been breaking rules. And it started off as a kid when people would tell me no, and I think our moms and dads generally tell us no, and that we don't like it. But certain people do certain things. I just rejected it outright. And when the first memory I remember in business and was about age 11, my parents told me we were broke, didn't have any money, and no, they would not buy me a video game. And so I went out and started a video game business because I wanted to play video games. And that was sort of the theme of my life that started back 35 years ago. When I saw a problem, whether it was mine or somebody else's, I would start a business around it. And that led to more than 70 businesses being start and run. And some worked, a lot didn't. A lot I just learned things from. One of the funniest ones was starting a bookstore on campus when I was going to college. And I did it because I thought the bookstore was overcharging. So I started this business. It lasted about a week and I paid for school in that week, but it put the bookstore out of business. And the president of the university said, "You can't do that. We're going to have to kick you out." And I said, "Well, I am doing it and I guess I'll just leave." So eventually I got booted out of there. And then in the years to come, set up a lot of businesses. Most of my life has been pretty out of balance. It's kind of like the Olympics just ended, and the Olympians generally don't have a very balanced life. All they do is they train for years or decades, and that's their obsession. And that's really been my life for the last 30 years. This obsession around businesses, creating things, solving problems. And I've started a lot that have worked, and some of them have bankrupted me a number of times. And ultimately, the stuff that I'm doing today it looks like this incredible overnight success story, but it's on the back of 70 businesses and 3 decades of doing these things. And so it all looks easy when you look at it on a reel on Instagram, but you don't realize how many decades and how much grind and blood you've had to spill. And that's really where we are today. It's these decades of real world experience. It's beyond the books. It's actual practical stuff. And then that's what I come to the table with today is all those scars and all that baldness.
Yeah, and it's great that you're touching on that because that's kind of what I want to talk about and unearth, because it's too often people have this naive perception of business that they can become an overnight success and don't realize just how hard it is and the challenges involved. Because a lot of people don't want to hear that because a lot of people are inherently lazy. They don't want to put in the hard yards to succeed. So they want to hear a story about how you can succeed with very little effort in a very quick space of time. And that's just not reality in my experience. So it's good to talk to people about their journeys and to understand about the significance of their failures, the importance of the failures, and the role that those failures have played in their ultimate success, and just really unearthing, you know, the true realities of the journey and what are potentially the key ingredients to withstand it all and actually come out on top ultimately. So for you, one of the things I want to ask now before I forget, because it just just jumping up from what you were saying, are you the sort of person that gets a real enjoyment out of creating the business, but struggles once you've got it created and you want to hand it over to someone else? Or are you one of these people that not only loves the creation, but actually enjoys the journey of growth and subsequent years?
Well, it's interesting because if you look at my Colby, which is a personality profile, and you dive into it, both my business partner and I are very fast starts, very high, fast start, quick start, which means we love to start things and then we get distracted. What I've got the ability to be very detail oriented, which is a little bit of a psychotic thing because I don't love it, but I have the ability, which means I can go and I can grind away and do the detail work and have the vision. That's very unusual.
Yeah,
Most people have the ability to do one at a very high level, but typically it's very, very strange to have the ability to do multiples. So what I've noticed is that it teaches me a lot about whatever business it is to be in the weeds, and then as quickly as I can understand it, I can hand it off to somebody and have an intelligent conversation. A lot of people that are big vision or fast starts, they just say do it and they have no idea what's involved. But I mean, everything from coding to QuickBooks, I have the ability to do all these things, and it doesn't mean I should be doing it. It just means I have these skill sets. And so what I've learned is that you've got to migrate into a place of trusting other people to execute. What
yeah,
I see a lot of people doing though is there's a lot of abdicating responsibility where they say I need somebody to do my accounting or somebody to do my web design, and they have absolutely no idea what's going on, and so it's easy to get taken advantage of, and
yeah,
and that's also a problem. But it's just part of the journey. And like I've done the operations when I had my real estate company and was buying real estate for a decade. I was in the weeds. I would buy the real estate, I would go and lease it out, I would fix it up. I was the plumber, the electrician. I was doing all these things, the accounting, the
wow,
marketing, and you learn a lot. And so there's not,
yeah,
but there's no, that is a terrible hack if you're trying to follow Tim Ferriss's 4 hour work week to go do all that stuff, because it was more like 40-hour work day and it wasn't a 4 hour
yeah,
work week. So it's a different process. And quite frankly, most people aren't willing to do the work. If you're willing to do the work and grind, you're going to become vastly smarter and superior to the people that won't do the work. That's the great hack. That's how you become super successful, by beating your brains in and learning at the fastest rate of speed.
and did you find it hard though to make the transition? You know, because as you said, you get into the weeds, you're doing all that stuff, but did you find it hard to then at some point recognize that you couldn't carry on doing that, that if you wanted to really take this to another level, you had to step out? You know, how challenging was it for you to make that transition?
It's hard. I mean, a lot of it because I trust myself, and I look at, I bet I was very suspicious of people. I had bad partnership, bad employees. I had a lot of these experiences. So the last 10 years, one of the concerns I had before I broke free of it was, man, people are going to steal from me. They're going to screw me. They're going to, like, all these problems. And I thought it's just not
Yeah,
worth it. I'll go do it myself. But you get to a point where something's working and you don't have the time or energy to do everything. And so
yeah,
mature business people know this. But when you're in a transition, it is not necessarily easy to do it. So but you have to, and ultimately you have to realize that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to hire people that are going to mess you up. They're going to do things that you're going to lose money because of somebody else's decisions. But all that
yeah,
stuff is the process of how you grow something and how you find its potential. If you don't do that, I'd venture to say that any business that you have an owner or a founder that doesn't go through that is never going to reach the potential of the business. And so therefore you're really living half. It's like a tree that grows halfway up. That's not normal,
yeah,
and it's not what you should be doing. So there, you have to do it, but it is not easy. It requires the trust. It also is helpful when you have people around you that have already done it, to where they can support you, because if you're on your own, you tend to get in your own head and you tend to not make
yeah.
progress. When if you could just trust somebody else saying this is the right thing to do, if you trust them enough, you can let go and go through the thing.
And you mentioned before about having a business partner. Was that a key sort of moment for you, getting a business partner? Was that part of the whole process of trying to step back and to therefore be in a better position to grow?
Well, so interesting with the business partner. I had a friend that I'd known for years that said, "Hey, it looks like you could really use some help." And so when he came on, he was really somebody that was helping, and it was more of an employee relationship. And
Yeah,
ultimately, years later, we decided to launch another firm together and actually be partners. But I think oftentimes people have partners when they just are afraid to hire somebody, because in reality, unless you're taking a loss, partners are generally not a great plan because there's a totally different dynamic. And you also are not just in partnering up with somebody, you're partnering with their spouse and everything else in their life. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of complication there. It's something people go into very easily and way too quickly. And what they should be asking is, does this partner bring in something that's like the opposite of my skill set? And is there another way? If you could hire a skill, my suggestion is go hire the skill and then maintain control and equity in
Yeah.
your venture. But it's just it's one of those things we want to go in business with our friends. I like working with my friends. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
think that for most people, you probably shouldn't go in business with. And if they're an employee, it's a lot easier to end that than if they're a partner.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Now tell me about some of the lessons you've learned and some of the experiences of failure that you've had. And I think I read about how you had a major failure where you lost your property portfolio. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, that experience was one of those things where if your ego gets too big, you're about to have a train wreck. I mean, that's just the reality. I don't care who you are. You could be a sports star, a business person. It doesn't make
Yeah.
any difference. If the ego is a useful thing to get you to be confident, but it also drives people into a space of arrogance. And that's what happened 15 years ago, where I thought I was 10 feet tall, bulletproof, made millions of dollars in real estate, and thought there's nothing that could touch me. And it did touch me. It blew my world apart. And it wasn't just that in 2008 there was a big financial crisis and this big event where the world, the markets, the real estate all got crashed and messed up. It was me not having proper thinking around the process of building something. There wasn't enough hedging, there wasn't enough position sizing, like all the things that professional investors and business people do that are really
Yeah.
at the top of their game. Quite frankly, the people that are 60, 70 years old that have been through cycles know this like the back of
Yeah.
their hand. I didn't know it. And one of the biggest mistakes that everybody should think about is, if you think you're the smartest person or you are the smartest person and you're the most experienced person around, you got a problem, because you're not going to be able to see into the future the way that you would if you had people around you, or at least somebody that was mentoring, that had been through cycles more than you, that's got more
Yeah.
gray hair or more bald than you. And that was
Yeah.
the thing when I thought I can do anything. And so I did too many things and lost 25 million, and I only had 20 million. So you can imagine that's where you end up
Oh,
learning what homelessness looks like. And that was part of the process. I needed to go through that to have a deeper appreciation, to understand things. And it took me about 5 years to really process it, do a lot of therapy and understand what had I done, and how responsible was I. And when I became incredibly, totally responsible, self-responsible, and said, this was all me. And I stopped saying it was the economy or it was Barack Obama
yeah.
or Bush or all those excuses. When I said this was
Yeah.
me, then I can actually change it. I can do something better going forward.
And so tell me, at that time when that happened, like, did you have a family or anything? Like, did you have dependents, or were you on your own at that stage?
So for anybody that's familiar with country music, my life looked like a country song, because at the time I had a girlfriend, I had a dog, I had house, and at the end of this thing, in a very short period of time, I had no girlfriend, no dog, no house, no money. And so I really probably should have moved to Nashville and attempted songwriting. Probably could have done quite well based on my own experience. It would have been very real. But
Yeah.
it all went away. And that was part of the journey. Was we're so afraid of judgment and losing people's opinions of us that we think are important, or losing people, losing stuff. And when you
Yeah.
lose stuff, you kind of realize what's actually really important. And what I realized is I hadn't spent enough time on relationships. I had spent all this time on the stuff and proving that I was valuable because of this stuff. And when it went away, I thought, well, who the hell is Damion at this point? Maybe he's just a guy that was collecting stuff, and would the world miss him? And I think that the answer is probably not much. My mom would have, but probably
Yeah.
most people not so much outside of that.
So how did you cope? Like, you're talking about sort of 5 years. So, like, I'm just trying to get a picture of it. So, okay, immediate, sort of nearly overnight. It won't be literally overnight, but you end up $5 million dollars in the hole. What did you do? Like, what did you do for income, and how did you get yourself out of it, and how did you stay sane and not just sort of totally give up?
Well, there's a psychological graph. If you look it up on the internet, you can find it's the cycle of grief, and there's all these phases that you go through, and one of them is denial. So in the very beginning, my process was just ignore it, pretend it wasn't happening, and then blame
Yeah.
everybody, and then go into depression, and like there's all these phases. So how I went through it was I went through the whole process, and then at some point there's a process where you ask for help. And so I reached out and got really, really good help, people that were world class, and had them help me see what I couldn't, the blind spots. And we all need this with coaches, mentors, therapists. We all need it. There isn't a single example. I
Yeah.
don't care if you're the president of the United States or Tiger Woods or Simone Biles. Like, you're gonna need other people to help see your blind spots and help you see yourself swing. And so I
Yeah.
got through it by going into a process of deep introspective work, asking questions. Namely, the one question was, what is true? And I asked that one question, and my therapist asked the question with me every week for almost 2 years. And we got deeper and deeper into who I am, and really
Yeah.
the purpose. That was the work that had to be done. But it wasn't just, there's no quick answer. You mentioned it at the beginning. There's no hack. There's no four
Yeah.
hour and then you're done solving. Like, when you go through that kind of process and all the money that's lost, all the people's lives that are damaged and disrupted, the question is, what was that? And it takes time to figure it out. And on the other side, if you're willing to do the work, transformation can happen. And ultimately, I wrote a book called Reinvented Life with an old friend of mine, where we talked about that transformation. So I believe anybody can change. I believe people can
Yeah.
improve. I think people can dismantle themselves and reimagine their themselves. Most people won't. Most people 20 years from now are going to be an older, different physical body, same energy, same spirit as they are today. And so it's pretty predictable. I also know that people can change, but I know that you have to put an unbelievable amount of energy into the human body and the spirit for it to evolve and change. Otherwise, it's going to go back to and revert to its default, which is what it's always known.
Yeah. And do you think, like, because you sort of obviously really enjoy the creation of all these businesses, do you think you're naturally kind of a little bit more in tune than maybe some other people in terms of, or more accepting of change, that you're more able to change over time than maybe some other people?
Yeah, I think most people are afraid of change because they don't know, they don't actually trust their ability to adapt and adopt things that are evolving outside of themselves. What when you go through a process of embracing that, and then the struggle through it, eventually it becomes so normalized that when something comes up, it doesn't bother you. Like, I don't get phased by very many things, and I have processes and ways of dealing with those. But until you practice that, you're just like, I've done martial arts for or close to a quarter century, and so now, after doing it for a long time, I don't think about it. It's just natural. If somebody pulls a gun on me, or somebody tries to punch me or kill me, I'm going to
Yeah.
naturally do things. I don't think about it. I'm not worried about it. I have the training, and we can train ourselves to go through anything. We can train ourselves on change. One of the best ways to do that is to go to a foreign country that's not familiar with, where a language that is not similar to yours. Like, when I went to
Yeah.
China and Japan, very unnerving. And then you do it for a while, and it gets, you sort of like calm down. But I think
Yeah.
anything you can do to go outside of your norm is incredibly valuable. But when you sit and you stew, like you watch the news all day, or you just stare at your negative checking account balance and you don't do anything different, you're just going to end up spiraling down. And that's where most people end up.
Yeah, no, for sure. So how long did it take you after, that disaster with your property portfolio? How long did it take after that before you started your next business?
It took about 5 years for me to really engage. I was doing oddball things. I was doing some consulting, and doing eBay sales, buying and selling things. Like, there was all these little things, and part of it was there was a fear about getting back in the game. I didn't really want to get back in
Yeah.
the game. That losing that much money and having all the trauma it's debilitating, and there's a lot of scar tissue there. So part of it was removing the scar tissue, breaking it apart, and so it
Yeah.
took a while. And then when I got in, I was still dancing amongst a number of things. I didn't fully commit for another few years after that. And once I did, that's what changed everything. When I said, okay, I'm clear on who I am, I'm clear on my purpose, and I'm going all in on X. And when I went
Yeah.
all in on X, then everything changed, because when people said, "What do you do? Who are you? What's your mission?" It was very clear. It
Yeah.
wasn't, well, I've got 17 different businesses that I barely make any scratch on every day. It was, this is the thing. And I became well known for it with the EQRP, helping people all over the country in the United States, getting control of their retirement accounts, and help to drive that industry in a certain direction, because I was very clear on the mission and who I was. That changes everything, no matter what industry you're in.
And so looking back now, how different do you think your life would have been if you hadn't had that event where you lost your portfolio and somehow you managed to get through it all? How different do you think you would have been as a person right now? And would
You know,
that be good or bad?
I wonder if it would have just been a delay in the inevitable. I think we all have to go through things, and the question is, how fast can you go through them? One of the things that I would look back and tell myself, and anybody that's 20 or 30 or early on, is fail faster. Go through. Don't worry about the judgment, and I know you will anyway. Everybody does, but
Yeah,
go in and learn the lessons faster. So I needed that lesson. I needed the humbling. I needed to get my ass kicked and
yeah,
understand me better so that I could go do the thing I'm supposed to do. And I believe I'm on that path now. But that was incredibly important. Probably if it hadn't happened in 2008, it would have happened in 2010 or 12 or 20, and it would
yeah,
have just delayed. So I'm thankful that it happened then and not later. If I could do it back again, I probably would have done it earlier. And I'll tell you something funny, Paul. A guy that I met at a conference in
yeah,
2000, I went up to him and asked him if I could borrow some money to do real estate because I had just bought my first real estate property. And he said, "Well, how many times have you gone bankrupt?" And I looked at him like he was crazy. And I said, "What do you mean bankrupt?" He goes, "Well, after you've gone bankrupt a couple of times, why don't you reach out to us?" And I said, "You're the dumbest." And I thought that was stupid. But what I realized is that you're going to learn far more from mistakes and from losing money than you'll ever learn from making it. And that's what he was basically telling me. And Robert
yeah.
Kiyosaki said the same thing to me, years after that. And I've heard it over and over. And now I get it. People that have perfect track records are perfectly set up to crash and burn, probably with you in their car.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And but I tell you, one of the good things about America is I think you're a lot more accepting of that, of bankruptcy and moving on from it. In my country, yeah, it's not looked on very well at all. So if you go through that, people will look at you as if you obviously don't know what you're doing, and don't see the value in it. And I'm not saying that you encourage people to go bankrupt, but also understand what that actually means, and that it can be a great source of learning, and that you're pushing the envelope. Whereas if you don't, then it could well mean that you're not really pushing the envelope to really achieve anything much.
I totally agree with that. And then that comes back to societal pressure and people being really concerned about what other people think.
Yeah,
The crazy people, if you will, the Steve Jobs of the world, the people that are out there that are making huge impacts, they don't care what other people think if they think that they're
yeah,
crazy. What they care about is why they're here. And so I had a mentor that about 20 years ago said to me when I was at his place in Europe, he said, "You'll never have any idea how free you'll be until you stop caring what other people think." And a lot of societies, it's critical. There's like you want people to look at you in a positive light, but the reality is you're trapped. You're trapped by other
yeah,
people's opinions and judgments. And so I agree with you that the U.S. is a lot more forgiving societally, but people still look at mistakes as you're a big idiot. And
yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of people just play safe and then they tiptoe safely to death's door and they get there and then they go, "Oh man, that was dumb." And so that's something to really think about before you end up at the end days.
Yeah, and for you, so tell me, for you, how important is it? Like, do you even think about it in terms of enjoying the journey, enjoying every day, or are you all about I'll get my enjoyment when I achieve the goal? I mean, do you ever think about that?
The goal is far less important to me. I have targets because I think we all need targets, whether you're racing something or you have goals. Like I always have goals. My goals are always moving, and that's part of being a person. You're always stretching, and but the journey is like you will not hear me say, "I can't wait until I finish this thing, and then my life will be good." I may have
Yeah,
said that 20 years ago. You will not hear me saying it. In fact, it makes me cringe when I hear people
yeah,
say, "I can't wait until we get this thing done. I can't wait until I sell this. I can't wait until I get a raise." I look at them and I go, "Are you just?" There's a movie with Adam Sandler called Click, where he tries to fast forward through his whole life, and that movie hit me pretty hard. And so I think people are really missing the point. You'll wake up at 60, 70, 80 years old or dead, or the moment before you die, and you'll go, "What was I doing?" And you weren't in the process. I love the process, and it's not that Paul, there's a thing about people that think you should follow your passion and everything is bliss. And I
yeah,
fundamentally disagree with that. You should not follow your passion. You should follow your purpose. Figure out your purpose as quickly as you can in life. And some days you're going to be really passionate, and a lot of times you will if you're in your purpose. But there are
yeah,
some days where you're just going to be grinding the shit out of it, and you're going to be like, "I hate this. This sucks. It's hard."
yeah,
And the purpose though pulls you. It's like a north star. So that's what I get excited about. And when I get up, why I'm working, I have to force myself to take a break just to recharge one day a week. because I love what I'm doing so much. Even the pain, the struggles, the blood battles, like it's all part of the process. So it truly is the process. When you ask that question, it's the process I love. It's not the outcome.
Yeah, and I think that means a much higher quality of life as a consequence instead of delaying your happiness for some other future date. So how do you differentiate between your passion and your purpose?
Well, the purpose is something that it's meaningful for other people. Passion may just be enjoying it, may just be for you, but purpose and passion tend to be external, internal. What I've noticed is that somebody's purpose is here not for a heat. Like I was a really good hedonist in the 2000s. I was great at spending money and eating
Yeah,
and being kind of a dick, and I was passionate about what I was doing, but it wasn't really a purpose that was serving humanity.
yeah,
When there's a shift towards serving a million people, breaking a million people free from financial shackles and the bondage that goes along with money, that was a shift that had I was a side effect of that. So the more people that are helped, there's a benefit to me. Like Zig Ziglar has talked about, or he talked about before he died, that if you help enough other people get what they want, you can have anything you want. Well, I get so obsessed with the purpose of freeing other people that what ends up happening for me is a lot of options and a lot of wealth and things. That is not the focus. Passion tends to be very, very selfish, and it tends to be
yeah,
about the thing that's fun. And I can tell you when you're losing money or you have an employee sue you or all these different things, if your focus is on passion, it's going to wreck you. If your focus is on purpose and that's what's driving you, you're going to go right through
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. So true. And so tell us a little bit about what you actually do these days.
So the primary focus is giving people a clearer or a faster path towards financial freedom. And so there's a couple ways I'm doing that. One is giving people control of their retirement money. Most people have a lot of their future dependent on their retirement money, but they don't really have any control. They're just hoping that the stock market does well. And so
Yeah,
the company that I founded about a decade ago called EQRP gives people, this is primarily in the US, but it gives people control of their retirement money. And in different jurisdictions, different countries, there's different ways of doing that where you have control. That was a big part because people have to say it's my fault, my responsibility, I'm going to own it,
yeah,
and they run with it. And then the other thing that has evolved from that is the ability to create investment opportunities. So a number of us founded a company about 2.5 years ago called Frame Tech, and we're disrupting the entire construction industry by creating framing for housing and apartments that is way faster. The quality is 10 times better, and the waste is virtually eliminated. And it's like in the United States, there's a huge problem. We don't have enough housing. And in a
yeah.
lot of places in the world, there's not enough housing as populations
Great.
grow, and they're not
Yeah,
able to create it. So this is changing that. It's actually an exponentially improving situation as opposed to most things in business are incremental changes. This is actually fundamentally changing the entire process because of the patented technology that allows us to do things so much faster and so much more efficiently. And it's interesting if you ever see a house or an apartment or something that's being built with wood, there typically are dumpsters full of wood, trees that are just being thrown away.
absolutely.
Yeah, our
Yeah,
system eliminates 99% of that and gives a better product, does it 4 times faster, and does it for the same price. So that to me is
wow.
very purposeful. There's passion there too, but the purpose there is that we're helping to solve the housing crisis. And
Yeah,
we get to work together and everybody wins. The team wins, the people win, the community wins, the environment wins, the investors win. So that's to me, that's an incredibly meaningful process to be a part of something like that and pour myself into.
yeah. I mean that's a real issue. It's an issue here in this country, as it is in I'm sure lots of countries. I've got a construction site very close to where I am now, and you're right. You see big skip bins and that with all the rubbish going out, and it's a pretty slow process too, way slower than what is ideal. So any solution to that would be amazing. So for you, did you come across a person who's the inventor? I mean, or were you part of the invention team? I mean, how did that all evolve?
That's a great question. So when I look back, what I realized my focus had been on creating community. It had been about serving
Yeah,
people and building a community. And so I over the years I'd built this community, thousands of people in the community, not just a bunch of Facebook friends, but people that I had been serving in a very meaningful way for many years. And so it was sort of like serendipitous. I had people in my life that came together 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, and they said, we have this idea that we believe in, and we have decades of experience amongst all of us. We just need $40 million. And I said, okay, well, is that it? Just $40 million? And when I looked at the deal and I looked deeply into it, this idea was ready. It just needed the people and the money to come together. And so that's where this community came in, and they showed up and they said, okay, so all of us, me included, put this
Yeah.
$40 million into this idea, and we bet on the people, because investments in businesses are not about the idea, they're about the people, the execution,
Yeah.
the operators. That's what matters above everything else. Can they do the thing? Can they solve the problems as they come? And
Yeah.
ultimately, I get to be a part of that by bringing these people together and serving in my way. But I'm no tech genius, and I just happened to have focused on building a community over many, many years. And that was the overnight success story there, that people go, well,
Yeah.
how do you do this in 5 minutes or in 5 months? And I go, I have no idea. I don't know how you do that, because you're not going to build trust, a long-term trust with people that you met
Yeah.
5 minutes ago. They're not going to hand you checks for millions of dollars, but it will happen
Yeah.
if you build something. And that's where you become a farmer over a hunter. You go build and you plant seeds, and then you nurture them and you serve them. And one day there's so much fruit there, because you've nurtured things and you followed the universe and its natural laws.
Yeah. So tell me, with this innovation in the building industry, outside of America, have you taken it anywhere else yet? I mean, how far has it gone so far?
No, my suspicion. It's interesting because my partner was on a plane with some Australian developers, and they said, "When are you going to be in Australia?" And I suspect this technology and what we're doing will spill over into other countries that use this type of when things that are wood framed. Many places in the world do it. Some places it's mostly concrete, so it obviously isn't really applicable there. But my suspicion is that it will be in other countries, because if you're framing, you want to do it faster, with better quality, and waste less. There's no downside to it at all. So
Yeah.
it'll eventually spill over, and you'll see frame tech technology in other countries outside of the United States.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to have to do a bit of research on it. I mean, New Zealand, we very much use wooden framing, so we're an absolute sitter for it. So be curious to learn a little bit more about it. Now, another thing I know about you is that you have written quite a few books. Can you tell me about that and your motivation behind writing those books?
So writing books for me was a way to clarify my thinking. It was when I thought I knew something. There's a couple of things that have happened. I've written books because I wanted to understand what I thought I understood, and two, it's a cathartic process to get things out that are maybe stuck in your system, and three, it
Yeah.
allows you a lot of leverage to share these ideas with way more people. And so those are the
Yeah.
reasons that each of these books, most of them have been, in fact, all of them are learning books where people can learn. I'm not, I don't do Harry Potter. Like, I have no ability to write that story, but I can write the story of my experience and understanding of business and the things that I've been through. And it's also very
Yeah.
authentic. There's the stuff in the books is not just regurgitated information that I learned at a seminar. This is what I know from real world experience and a lot of work. And if I can get it into a book, it helps for me to know that I actually understand it. I've written books before, and I look at them and I go, what language is this? Because it doesn't make any sense. Like, I thought I understood something, and it was just this mash of chaos. So that's generally why I do it. Those three reasons.
Yeah. And sort of what sort of topics have you written on?
So the very first book was on real estate. It was the first $1 million that I lost, and each chapter was here's how I lost 20,000, here's how I lost 5 or 50,000, and it was to give people some leverage on some experiences and mistakes that they could avoid. And then I wrote Reinvented Life after the meltdown, or I wrote a book on retirement accounts. I've written books on gold and silver investing. One called Unicornomics, which is fundamentally, this came from the ideas that I learned studying Buckminster Fuller and then having all these businesses and going through this process. And the idea behind Unicornomics is there's a fundamental way, there's a structure for building a unicorn, $1 billion company. And basically what happens is you have to have these fundamental pieces correctly set up in the beginning. So my premise, and the premise of the book, is that there's a foundational 15%, meaning if you can get the first 15% right in a business, you have an
Yeah.
85% likelihood of that business succeeding. When people say, well, most like 9 out of 10 businesses fail in 5 years, and then 9 out of 10 fail in the next 5 years, it's because most of those don't have the foundational pieces. People are too anxious to go do something, and they don't actually put the things in place. Oftentimes they're undercapitalized. They don't have the right people that know the right skills. There's all these reasons. And so that book was in, it's a tiny book. It's actually fairly fast. You can read it in an hour. And so I
Yeah.
wrote that book because I had all these businesses, and I thought, how do these, what's the experience here that I can share that crosses over all these businesses for people, no matter what business they're in? And
Yeah.
that's why that was written about 6 years ago.
Wow. And so for you, like you've started a lot of businesses. I mean, how many of them are still going? And have you sold some of them, or ones that are still going, you've kept them? I mean, what's sort of the history on that?
Yeah, a number of the real estate companies were sold off at different points. A number of them just basically just stopped working because there was nothing really happening there. There's a half a dozen that are still going on at different levels, ranging from $1 million a year to Frame Tech is worth 463 million. And so there's a different range. It's not just a bunch of, I hear a lot of people talking about all their businesses, and each business is making $12 or $1,200 or $12,000. And so I look at those and I go, you have a bunch of hobbies, but the
Yeah.
businesses that I'm talking about, all these businesses have CEOs, they have payroll, they have revenue, or they're building something. Typically, there's a scalability option inside of them. It's not just Damion doing another job. People oftentimes call their businesses, but they're actually just a job that they have,
Job.
and
Yeah.
it's not really a business. A business can do something without you. And if it's
Yeah.
just you, like if you go on vacation for 6 months and your business is gone, that's not a business. That is a
No.
job. It's a consultancy of some sort.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So tell me, look, based on all of your experience so far, what do you think the key ingredients are for people that want to be entrepreneurs and they want to succeed? What do these people need to look like in order to give them the best chance of success?
Well, I can tell you that this is all internal stuff. So it's interesting. Like we have some politics going on where people talk about this idea of equity, and and everybody needs to be the same and equal. And I just, it's fundamentally incorrect. It's bad thinking. The keys are being fearless, committed, resilient, and there's a you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to go for it, like a honey badger. If you've ever seen the honey badger video on YouTube, there, I call our people, our community, a bunch of honey badgers, because they are fearless, and there's a commitment. They're resilient, and I think that those are key. You have to be willing to say, okay, I'm wrong, and pivot quickly. It's not really how
Yeah,
much you know anymore. I mean, it's wild. The information is all out there, and Chat GPT and these AIs can do things faster than we can do them. The rote memorization doesn't matter anymore. It's changing everything. So the key is, are you willing to go learn and then pivot and be wrong and pivot again and
yeah,
constantly pivot? And are you willing to grind? I see that very rarely anymore. I see people wanting more and more by doing less and less, and they're gonna get wiped out. Whether they're an employee or a business owner, you have to be willing to do the hard work, and that is not 40 hours a week. It's like, people think that they think that they can do something and they can leverage other people, but if it's easy, then somebody's going to copy you and do it better, faster. And so you've got to
yeah,
constantly think, how can I serve people better, faster? Just like, what is it that you're doing there? When you focus that way, then things tend to shift. If you're trying to figure out how you're going to get more money, then you're probably already dead.
yeah. And so for you, am I right in saying that you come across as a person that loves to learn, and that part of the whole journey is you've got to be open to constantly learning new things. So it doesn't really matter what degree you may or may not have at university. It's all about your thirst for knowledge. Is that a factor for you, or has it been a factor for you?
Yeah, I mean, and this really comes down to one thing, and that's being curious. So the thirst, the quench, like when people stop learning, they stop being curious. You think about what's so interesting about kids; they're curious about everything. They're out there,
Yeah,
and one of the mistakes that people make is they're curious about everything all the time, and they don't actually focus on anything. So they have this broad interest set, but they're not really that interesting because they know a little bit about a lot. I think that that's useful, but I think with the caveats that you really got to figure out, decide on that one thing. People go, "Why don't I don't want to limit myself?" It's like people that say, "Well, I want to date everyone out there." It's like, well, that's really not going to do well for a marriage or a long-term relationship if you're dating the whole world. So you
yeah,
at some point you pick, and
yeah,
sometimes you're wrong. People get married, they get divorced. Sometimes you start a business and it's a flop. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What matters is you go all into it. So you start off being very curious, and then when you're in business, you're very curious about what you don't know, and you're
Yeah.
also very curious about what you know that just ain't so. That's a Mark Twain thing. Like, you really got to be mindful that you're going to be wrong more than you're going to be right. And
Yeah.
instead of having your ego hold on to this need to be right, the instead it's a, okay, what's the opportunity here to learn and be better? And that's where you become powerful, and really you start making the correct changes and going down the right path by having that philosophy. Otherwise, you're going to get run over by something.
Yeah. Too many people place too much importance on their ego and are not prepared to set it aside for the greater good, and they stumble over their ego.
That is a no more accurate words have been spoken in a long time. It's the ego is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. It's the same thing as, as a knife. A knife can be used to do a lot of things. It can also be used to kill, even
Yeah.
yourself. Like, there's
Yeah.
so the ego can be very, very useful if you're conscious to it. But I don't think most people are conscious. Their ego just runs wild, and they don't want to have anybody tell them anything that might hurt their feelings. So basically, people just run a life with the ego that controls it instead of a purpose or a higher level consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I noticed about you, Damon, is your energy. I mean, it comes across just talking to you. You've got loads of energy, and I think that's an incredibly important ingredient in your successes. The fact that you've got so much energy and passion that comes through in it. If you're sitting here and you were very flat, it just wouldn't ring true that you would be able to do the things that you've done. But having the energy and the passion that you've got, yeah, it's very obvious why you'd be able to go out and suffer the challenges, and achieve what you've achieved. So, yeah, look, thank you so much for spending your time with me. I know you're going to stay on Do Read to Succeed in a moment, which I'm looking forward to have a bit of a chat. But yeah, I definitely want to catch up with finding out a bit more about your building technology. So, really interesting area. It's an area of absolute demand. So I'm very curious to know more about that too.
Well, and for you and for anybody that's curious about because we're all going to see it, we're going to see it spread as it grows. But if you're curious about what the future of construction, and I think the future of business is we're really thinking through this differently and making sure that all the stakeholders, all the people involved, and the environment, we're doing things that are good for the environment too. So
Yeah.
frametech.com is where you can learn about it and understand and see the things that we're doing to innovate. You're going to see us posting a lot of videos on LinkedIn and such. It's a really useful tool to set. It kind of sets a bar for business and for how you could maybe do better with your own business, and really what to expect from businesses that you're going to interact with. I think people and businesses can do far better than they've done. I think a lot of businesses have been doing what they've done and they've gotten away with not changing it. And our goal is to help inspire and be the leader by example in the future of business.
Well, that's great goals to have. So all the best for that. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll have a chat in a moment about Read to Succeed. So thank you in the meantime.
All right. Thanks, Paul.